Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session with number 18. And the title is COVID-19 and Beyond, Implications for Sustainable and Resilient Urban-Rural Partnerships. We thought that this session with this title is a must for the conference in these days and in these times. In response to the topical COVID-19 pandemic worldwide, we have decided to include it in the conference program. The current pandemic affects our entire life, and in present, it is a worldwide challenge. And it is closely connected to the urban-rural partnership, to the interface of these both entities in a very noble manner. Many urban people are discovering the value offered by the urban hinterland and rural areas to cope with the COVID-19 situation. At present, we are learning a lot about dealing with shocks. Next. Which requires completely new arrangements of our daily lives. We are discovering new deficits and obstacles which need to be addressed and eliminated. And to exchange on experiences and to discover new challenges, we have invited 7 quite diverse contributions. You see it on the slides. Our session is structured in 3 parts. We will start with 2 comments which have a more general character. Then we will continue with 2 presentations which have their focus on wider challenges. And finally, we will discuss local references and case studies. We asked you, the presenters, to refer to 2 major questions. So the question is, what can we learn for strategically improving our ability to become resilient when facing unforeseen shocks in the future? And on the one hand, these are pandemics, but it could be also other types of shocks. And second, how can urban-rural partnerships foster solutions to deal with these shocks? So we are looking forward to hear very nice, very interesting, maybe provocative contributions. And we ask all our contributors to give an 8-minute statement, no longer. This should guarantee a vivid discussion among us. So we will start with our first speaker, which is Stefan Batka. Stefan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sigrun. It is a pleasure joining this session and also having been able to organize it with you. And I'm having the pleasure to share with you just in a second my screen. I hope it arrives now. And it will be a short presentation about the so-called memorandum post-corona, providing sustainable and resilient development of cities and regions. And as you can see by the large number of co-authors, me in between many of them, it was a real co-production of an effort that I would like to introduce you to in the next moment. The motivation of that memorandum has been arrived and developed in March and April this year, when the drastic changes to daily life appeared to us due to the coronavirus and the pandemic that were associated with the first lockdowns we faced in Germany, but also in Europe and globally. We realized that there was not only a severe disruption in daily life, but also that the normal mode of living and of functioning was interrupted, and new possibilities, new impulses appeared in many different areas, also related to urban and spatial planning and the development of our cities and surroundings. So we strived for a joint discussion about the new trends with a wide audience of practitioners, mayors, and further politicians, researchers, which have been partners or supporting and collaborating with different flagship initiatives of the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. So who is that we I am referring to? It's been a collaboration of the flagship initiatives, resource efficient districts, municipality innovative, and Synthesis project working City for the Future, as well as Stadtland Plus, which I have been the pleasure to introduce this morning. These 4 projects are so-called synthesis projects of larger BMBF funding measures. And we brought together in a, let's say, quite ad hoc organized workshop more than 200 participants who met on June 18th to discuss the effects and the impacts of the corona on the city of the future, but also on the rural-urban impressions related to the development. And I'd like to present just in a nutshell the outcome of that document, which you can find for download in the mobile event app. We had different topics discussed, and in these discussions, we arrived at, in particular, research questions that would guide the further also scientific work and have been a message towards the Ministry of Education and Research, but also other scientists and collaborators. The first one, urban structures and a diversity of users are addressed through the crisis. We have seen a demand for qualitative development now even stronger than before. How to quantitatively develop cities further has therefore been a particular question posed to us, especially in the light of conflicting goals. So we are more and more appreciating the public spaces, but face the calls for densification as well in the cities of today. The second point, the public spaces that I've been mentioning, we are realizing in Corona times that they are more valued than ever before. Having just the ability to go out for a few hours a day and only on your own, it becomes more and more obvious that in the densely urbanized part, in contrast to the rural areas, public places are of immense importance. A research issue related to that is what is the future of public spaces and the promotion of a sufficiency-oriented design of them, especially in relation to climate adaptation and the expansion of green and blue infrastructures. Mobility is a next topic that has been discussed, in particular mobility when it is facing social or physical distancing requirements. We all know that for a more sustainable and environmental improved mobility, we should use public transport, but public transport with the closeness in it has become a big obstacle and is facing drastic shrinkage at the moment. So the question is, how can these patterns be brought together? How can public transport remain attractive? And one thing we do see is that we have an increase in bicycle and also in by foot traffic, which is much welcomed, but the public transport that is also connecting the urban and the rural is put at question mark for several reasons. A different perspective is related to housing policy. We see an increased interest, for moving now outside of the cities and enjoying the countryside for the space it is offering. And that is enabled by being able to work remotely. There is no longer, for many of us, the need to travel to office. And with that movement, also the interest and the demand for land outside the rural areas being close to the cities is increasing. So here land take is an issue that we are facing, and we need more integrated approaches of municipalities to deal with that. The focus topic regarding the urban-rural perspective is concerning the urban and regional production and value creation. Here the corona crisis has brought a shift in the awareness about local sovereignty, about regional products and regional economies. You can see in the picture a so-called Marktschwärmer in German, a place where people are collecting goods that have been grown locally on a certain day in the week. We need to identify further the potentials and promote the opportunities of circular economy on an urban regional scale in order to build also increased consumer interest in the regionally produced goods. Last slide with content points is referring to how do we have to change the institutions of our cities and municipalities to being able to cope with that. The public services needs new organizational forms in response to crisis, which is maybe a general understanding and phenomenon if we are facing extreme events. So we need research to better help us cope with extreme events and crisis. The post-corona city, therefore, needs to be somewhat, as has been discussed in Germany, more agile, more made and brought into the opportunities perspective to being able to react quickly on change. And this has to be in collaboration with the administration, business, civil society, and the citizens. What are therefore the key messages as my closing slide for urban-rural partnerships from the memorandum? We see and have discussed with the partners that an increased reliance upon solidarity has been shown during the pandemic, and this is true for the rural in as much as for the urban settings. A new demand and interest for residency in rural areas is becoming obvious, which seems to provide a threat to the land issues, but also is providing opportunities. New impulses are opened up by the possibilities of home office requirements. Agile processes and governance are required to adapt in the ever-changing challenges, which is of course also referring to the imminent climate crisis and other extreme events that are putting question marks on how sustainable we are developing. We should use this moment of opportunity that is provided us now. With that, I thank you and close my presentation.
Well,
thank you very much, Stefan, for the first presentation this afternoon. Any questions, any comments? Looking in the chat, there I found one remark from my side, because I realized that this morning our keynote speaker, Mrs. Vasilakou, mentioned that she is not convinced to have new, that she is not convinced to creating new institutions. No? And you mentioned we need a change of institution, and maybe also we need new institution. How can we bring these both ideas together?
You're absolutely right. I'm just looking for my mic. You're absolutely right. It is the question, the big question of the how that also Margaret Moll was referring to this morning that we have to face. And this, again, is something, as from our memorandum, we say it is something we need more research about. So I don't have the final answer. As what scientists usually do, we say we need more investigation and research. But that can't be the full solution for the moment. We do see in practice a lot of attempts that help us to understand where actually municipalities are able to run the system quite smoothly. It is astonishing how well actually many municipalities in the urban areas have been able to cope with this pandemic. In some countries more and others less, but globally, if we understand the severity of the problem, I think it's quite remarkable how quickly the bureaucracy and the red tape authorities have got into becoming front runners of the perspective. So this is, I think, something we also can look at already and identify best practice examples, as is done in the exchange of the many participants.
Thank you very much. So there are no more questions in the chat. So
maybe I'm not sure, Lucas, our assistant, have there been questions in the MEA posted that you would like to share?
Yes, we've got a question from a socio-ecology researcher.
Lucas, we cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me?
No, it's fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've got one question from a socio-ecology researcher. The question is, how do you define resilience in this research?
How do I define?
Define resilience in this research.
Okay.
In brackets, she also said Merav Cohen from Israel. I don't know if that's
I'm not 100% sure if it is defined in the document itself. So we need to look into it for the question of the memorandum. But personally, of course, it is about the question in as much we are able to cope with such situations and are being able to go back to a certain starting point that allows us to continue the situation. That would be my very simple answer to that. But allow us to have a smooth restart. As you know, the monopoly game. So go back to the starting point. The rules and the general institutions remain that stable. If we are able to define that stable institutions, the rules of the game in that context, that we are allowed to continue with the rules. Then, if we are able to do that, then we have a resilient system, I would say.
Oh, thank you, Stefan.
One more question.
Our next speaker will be Carsten Butsch from the University of Cologne. And he will present some reflections from a geographical perspective, this COVID-19 challenge. Carsten, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do you see my full screen and not my presenter screen?
It's only the presenter screen, so maybe you have to change that one.
Okay, now you have the full screen. Very good. Okay. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for organizing this and for inviting me to this session. So I'm very glad to Sigrun, Kabisch, and Stefan Batka for organizing this. And yeah, what I would like to do with you in the next 8 minutes is I would like to take you through 3 steps. The first one is I'm a health geographer, and that's sometimes a little bit, not very mainstream geography. So I would like to, first of all, tell you a little bit about the pandemic from a health geographer's perspective. Then I would like to take a broader perspective. I've been together with other colleagues organizing a symposium in July on geographies of COVID-19, and I would like to present some highlights so that you can get an idea what geographers are thinking about the pandemic, or what questions geographers are working on. And then finally, I will draw some conclusions and say which implications does that have from my perspective for urban-rural partnerships. So health geographers can be divided actually into 3, let's say, major schools of thought. The first ones are disease ecologists, and they look at factors which explain the distribution of health and disease. And typical questions for this stream of or school of thought would be, which factors in the environment result in the emergence of COVID-19, and which factors would influence the distribution of COVID-19 in time and space. These are a lot of spatial analysis which are being done there. And this is, I think, at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody daily opened the Johns Hopkins University website, and these would actually be questions, or this would be perspectives on this disease ecology stream. Then secondly, geographers are working, or health geographers are working on health systems research, and questions related to that would be, how does the pandemic affect health systems locally, nationally, and globally? And how can new infrastructures, for example, fever ambulances, or currently, for example, vaccine centers, that's a very geographic question. How can they actually be allocated in space so that we have an equitable distribution? And then we have a third stream in geography of health, that's a post-medical geography, which looks at questions that are more informed by social theory. And that typical questions would be, how does COVID-19 change how we move in space and use places, for example? The picture which we saw in the first presentation of that bus where people are keeping a distance, that is actually a microgeography post-medical health geographer would look at. And how does a pandemic, for example, change power relations? I think this is also quite interesting, what a situation like this can actually, how that can change power relations also in space. So yeah, that was a more general point or comment, what that pandemic situation means from a health geographer's perspective. With that, I would like to take you to the symposium, which we did, and that was open not only for health geographers, but for geographers as a whole. Together with my colleagues Tabea Bauk-Hüffer from Innsbruck University and Markus Nüsser from Heidelberg University, we were actually discussing in April, when we somehow, I mean, in the first situation of the lockdown, everybody was very shocked and trying to organize the lectures and everything digitally. But we actually came to the conclusion that as scientists, we are seeing a great change in the world around us, and we need to bring our colleagues together to talk about that. That was somehow the spirit of the symposium, which we organized from July 6th to 8th, and we invited all geographers to present what they are currently working on, thoughts, ideas, comments, work in progress. And we had 6 themed sessions, parallel sessions, and we had 2 nice keynotes and a concluding panel. And I would just like to highlight some of the issues which geographers are working on. And the first thing I would like to show you is related to is from the keynote by Iona Datta, who is an urban geographer at the University College of London, and she works on migrants which had to flee Indian cities, which is actually a very interesting point, and I think very important for this topic, because we have a lot of local migrants living in Indian megacities, but also in other Asian megacities, and those people were expelled from the cities. They had to leave. I think all of you have seen that in the news. And the question is, how does that actually change the relation of the city and its migrants? And I think if we look at this from today's conference, it also changes the relation between the urban and the rural. Another presentation which I found interesting when I've been reflecting on what I've seen in all those days, which I would like to highlight here, is my colleague Tabea Bauk-Hüffer. She presented on the life of students, and she looked at how students from Innsbruck actually fled the city and went to their parents' places at the rural side, which are regarded as safe places there. What I actually also found quite interesting in the session on digital economy and food systems, several presenters looked at how this pandemic situation will change commerce and what that actually means for urban centers, which are providing functions for the rural areas. But what is actually quite interesting is that they said that the online retail is something which will probably not use this window of opportunity. And then one quite interesting question was looking at Eastern Germany, a presentation by Helmut Klüter, who actually showed that the so-called disadvantages of Eastern Germany, like lower connection to globalized processes, lower population density, actually became advantages in the pandemic situation. So that was also quite an interesting perspective, which was presented there. So these just some highlights which I randomly picked from this whole presentation. We had two keynotes, 36 presentations and 200 presenters. So this just to give you an idea, and I just selected those which I thought would be interesting for this. So I only have very few moments left and just one slide. So some thoughts I would like to contribute here. So the urban advantages become disadvantages in the pandemic. The question is that now only temporarily, or is it a societal trend which we see? We've seen a boost for digitalization that may increase the attractiveness of not central places if the infrastructure is adequate. When we look at the also to the global south, we see that the circular migration came to a halt. So the exchange between the urban and the rural actually was very stopped abruptly. The question is, how will these migration systems continue in the future? And then what I also have been thinking about is post-COVID-19 cities. Will they be transformed permanently? Is what we see, what the lockdown actually causes. Do we see a loss of centrality in cities? And if so, does it mean that we will get a new relation between the city and its rural surrounding? So there might be new commuter relations, there may be new definitions of functions for rural spaces. For example, if people cannot go to vacation abroad anymore, will that change the rural side because people will more use this for recreational purposes? So I think that we will see interesting changes. And I think the big question is whether the changes we see are temporarily or if they are permanent. And that is something which will be fascinating to observe in the next years. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. For me, the mask is actually the picture of the pandemic. And if you're interested in the documentation of our symposium, you will find extended abstracts under this link here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carsten. Lucas, are there any questions in the chat or in the feed?
We don't have any specific questions to this presentation, but we have two questions for the presentation before, I think. I'm not sure, maybe we can ask this question because it's more general, by Rainer Boldoan, which is, won't the recreation in green spaces in rural areas lead to increased traffic, whose consequences should also be taken into account?
I think if I start trying to answer, if the connection is as described, of course, yes. And I think the impacts on traffic, on mobility are severe. At the moment, we can face what would be if there was less traffic. You have heard about the cleaner air, not only because of reduced industry production, but also of reduced traffic, of reduced air traffic in particular. So, and that is something that we face on the one hand, and that we need for sustainability reasons. A general shift in the way we are mobile is a general question of concern, I would say. And this also is referring to how we are using the space in the cities that at the moment is just to a too large degree space for cars that are standing around. I think this is a very big and important question going, and that is and has its relevance beyond the COVID question, but it would be great if COVID gave a new momentum to find a sustainable answer to it. So I would try to pick up this question in the way it should be a new impulse to have us rethinking how we are mobile in general.
Yeah, Lucas, is there a second question?
That's a second question, but we have to keep the time in mind. But we can quickly answer this, I think, by Dr. Maximilian Überham. Exciting research at Carsten. Do you think that hospitals in rural areas become more important again through COVID-19 from a geographical perspective?
Oh yes, that's a very, very exciting and interesting question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think what the COVID-19 crisis actually shows is that the cuts which we have done, and the increase in efficiency, and that's not only taking place in Germany. That's also, I just read a very interesting article about Italy, where some parts of the severeness of how COVID actually hit northern Italy is related to the severe cuts. So I think there will be rethinking in the health sector, which will result in keeping more, let's say, safety space. And the idea through which has been kind of the master idea for planning healthcare infrastructure, which was more efficiency, larger centers, which can be do some things more effectively and on a more professional level. I think we will see that this will stop, because we actually need also in the broadness, we need a good healthcare facilities and a good healthcare sector. So I think the discussion will move into this direction in the next years.
So thank you for these answers and comments. So now we can go to the second round of our presentations. And as I indicated in the beginning, the second part is more dedicated to the embeddedness of the corona issues, corona situation, into wider challenges. And I would like to invite Mariana Di Brito to give her statement.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening, depending from where you're from. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Is everyone being able to see it? Okay. So my name is Mariana De Brito, and I'm a postdoc here at Helmholtz Institute for Environmental Research. And together with my colleagues, we try to develop a new methodological contribution on how to tackle these courses. More specifically, we are looking into how sustainability transformations are framed inside the coronavirus discourse. So since the onset of the pandemic, there is an ongoing narrative that the COVID is a window of opportunity for rebuilding better, for building more resilient in the future. And this is evidenced by many policy briefs, research papers, and articles. So here we want to investigate, is this really the case? And we also, if the coronavirus crisis, if it's framed as an opportunity or rather a threat for sustainability transformations. And to investigate this, we had analyzed 85,000 newspaper articles that have been published in German outlets during the first wave of the COVID crisis. And we look at this data from very different lenses. So at one hand, we have this big data analysis where we analyze all this information using text mining approaches. And on the second hand, complementary, but also with the same importance, we do what we call a thick data analysis, which is content analysis. And the analogy we use here is that we are trying to, like thickening a soup, we are trying to give context to this big data approach. And here we analyzed a subsample of 462 articles and try to see which narratives are being discussed. So at a first glance, this first graph here shows the number of articles about sustainability from 2017 until July this year. And as you can see, the number of articles that report about sustainability issues, it decreased drastically since the onset of the crisis. And actually, many of the articles we read, they actually say that sustainability was put aside. And this is quite different from the discourse that has been going on the academia world. And when we did a machine learning apply a machine learning algorithm to all these 85,000 articles, to see which kind of topics are being dealt with. And politics, sports, everyday life, or statistics, they come as like quite important, but sustainability does not appear as an issue here. So we delve a little bit deeper into the data and we classify this 85,000 according to different sustainability issues, for example, smart mobility or energy. And we found only 2,300 that talk something about sustainability. And for some topics, this is increasing. For example, there are more articles now about smart mobility, of how this implies to our cities. Also regarding energy and climate change. So, but this just provides us a glimpse of, okay, which topics are going up or down, but doesn't explain why and what exactly is going on. So to look into this data from a different perspective, we selected those that had reported more about sustainability, and we are really reading through all of them and trying to classify then, okay, if this article classified as a threat for sustainability or as an opportunity. And so far, like what we found, they did not finish this analysis, but so far we see that many articles, they see that it is indeed an opportunity, and the COVID crisis can be seen as a blueprint for a climate crisis, because everything was dealt quite fast, and it showed that we can actually change our procedures very fast. There are also others that claim that COVID is very good for nature, because we have this short-term effects on air quality and water, as already was mentioned before. However, there is this rebound argument. So yes, people are traveling less to go to work, but now they are afraid of using public transport, and maybe they will use more private cars. And in Germany, we have also a premium for buying new cars. So it's unclear. There are also some that see COVID as a threat for economic development, especially car companies and oil industry. They think that this will threaten the economy, and that many of these articles, they phrase that sustainability issues should be set aside for now, and the focus should be on reboosting the economy. And there are also some that see that COVID interferes with political negotiations on sustainability, because they are delayed funding and so on and so forth. So what we can take from this analysis that is still ongoing is that, yes, there is a window of opportunity, but this window is half open, but this should not be taken for granted. And another from the methodological point of view, by linking this big data and tech data, we can have both a very broad overview of which kind of topics are being discussed, and we also can have a very close analysis of particular discourses. So thank you very much, and if you have questions, I'm looking forward to reply to them.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Are there any questions in the mail chat?
Right now, I don't see any questions at this point.
Okay. Yeah, we have a question from an attendee of this session here, Annika.
Yeah, from the side. Thank you, Mariana. I would like to know if you now look on your codes and your methodology, like the subjects of sustainability that you chose for the mining, would you now do something different again, or maybe did you even adapt during the process to include issues, to exclude issues? I would be interested in this process.
It was very interactive. So I don't know if you all could hear Annika, but it was very interactive approach. We changed the coding system multiple times. but the advantage of the approach we are using is that now the process is completely kind of automatized. So if we decide to look for a different aspect, it's not that difficult to do it. If there's something missing, for example, we have not really looked into rural and urban issues for this analysis, but it will be possible to do it.
Would you like to give an example, like for a change you did, which was due to the changing situation and this global phenomenon?
So at some point we realized that actually right now we want to see which politicians are linked to which kind of discourses. So we first we had just these topics, and then we realized right now we want to see who, if it's the Green Party, if it's I don't know, any other actor that is pushing this narrative, and this is what we are working right now.
I would like to add a question to you, Mariana. In my opinion, your results describe the complexity of this situation. It's not only positive or negative, it's not only a window of opportunity, but maybe it can be a window of your opportunity. What can we distillate from your analysis concerning this task to deal with this completely new situation?
So what I think is that it is a window of opportunity, but if we really want to make a change it, and especially because now there's a lot of funding for rebuilding our economy.
Yeah.
So we have to set very clear criteria.
Right now we don't hear you, Mariana. Maybe you could unmute yourself again.
You're still muted.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know where did I stop talking.
Repeat it.
So what I said is it can be made a window of opportunity if we have very clear criteria, and that this is what we see is that there are many statements by government and politicians that they want to do something about it, but it's not so clear if this is really being pushed forward. Any other question?
Yes, we've got one question from the
Any
audience.
other questions?
By Malte Möck. She says, amazing, if I got it correctly, food issues are pushed off the agenda the most. This is particularly puzzling for me, given COVID outbreaks and the farming sectors connecting these topics. Are there first ideas on why this is observed?
Could you please repeat?
Okay, the question is, it is particularly puzzling that the food issues are most often pushed off the agenda. I have to find the question again. This is particularly puzzling for me, given COVID outbreaks in the farming sectors connecting these topics. Are there first ideas on why this is observed?
So we had a category called food supply, but actually when we dig deeper into it, we saw it was mostly about like individual needs, not really food security. And there were a lot of discussion regarding farming, especially because there is an ongoing drought, and like the farmers are already pressured by the drought, and then this adds another layer of challenges. But I do not really know if I could really address the question because I did not understand so well. I'm sorry.
Okay, any more questions?
Not right now from the audience.
No. So Therefore, now we change to another format. The next presentation will be given by Frauke Kraas from the University of Cologne. Unfortunately, she cannot be with us, but she sent us her presentation and a pre-recorded presentation. So, and now we will see, watch this video, and afterwards we have the chance to ask questions and to discuss this topic with Carsten Butsch, because he is he's working close together with Frauke Kraas. Now we will start with this presentation.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to the organizers for having invited me to this session. In the following, I would like to deal with, beyond COVID, the need for comprehensive health transformations in the Asian rural-urban nexus. And I apologize that I cannot be joining you today due to the fact that I'm responsible rapporteur for German Research Foundation's selection committee on collaborative research centers, which is evaluating today, and I'm pretty sure that my colleagues Sigrun Kabisch and Carsten Butsch will be able to answer the questions of the discussion. Otherwise, please always feel free to contact me via email. New urban settlements. So what is needed worldwide is huge new infrastructure in terms of mobility, food and water supply, as well as to health and education. I will focus today on health and what we can learn in the current COVID-19 pandemic is a clear lesson. Our existing health systems are insufficient. Largest share of urban dwellers nowadays in Asia and also in Africa. What became very evident that it is no longer a rural exodus alone, but we have a much more complex rural-urban nexus and vice versa. Migration is seasonally, temporarily, transnational, selective, and also segregatively moving. We have bidirectional migration. We find multi-stage migration. And it became clear not only since the so-called Asian crisis that one of the most important rural functions is they are kind of collection bases for migration from the cities to the cities. So we have a fluid, almost breathing connectivity between mobility networks with in and out migration. Kabisch and Ulrich Kuch, so from medicine, geography, sociology, and zoology from various universities, we are working since several years on the question of health transformations in Asia. We're distinguishing urban transition from urban transformation in the following way. While urban transition deals with the more incremental, more sectoral change and changes within systems, urban transformation leads and deals with much more fundamental, multidimensional, partly radical and often irreversible regime changes. It becomes clear that we have quite substantial gaps in the currently existing knowledge. The first is dealing with specific features of cities which are causally related to health. The second is dealing with substantial urban health advantages which we find in cities and which compared to the rural areas are much more advantageous. In our view, third, cities have to be seen in a much more holistically way as areas where there are huge health deficits, and to make cities more healthy or less unhealthy, we need to understand them not just from an infrastructural or from a medical point of view, but we need to understand systems as very complex systems. And fourth, in order to achieve healthy and sustainable urban futures, we need to know much more about the different layers of health, about the different ways how population and the communities are accessing health and health systems in the urban as well as in the rural sector. Years together on kind of a state of the art in respect to where do we stand in what we know about urban health and the rural-urban health nexus in Asia. So what was very evident to us based on systematic studies of the existing literature is that there is a huge lack of particularly empirical data in Asia. While most of the work is still focusing on rural health, the new and increasing problems of urban areas are vastly ignored. What is also lacking amongst numerous articles dealing with specific problems is that we do not have a perspective currently which is focusing more on system science. Empirical research is mostly bridging scientific disciplines, but needs to provide an advanced understanding of urban health, which is inter- and also transdisciplinary. And what we also need is a much more differentiated intra-urban analysis of the vast health inequalities which we find in urban areas. Against that background, in our approach, we are focusing on 5 key issues within the health transformations. This is number 1, the huge importance of family transformations. Think about aging or traditional family ties eroding, also the empowerment of women, for instance. The second is lifestyle transformations, very evident in Asia. Social networks, a polarized coexistence of different lifestyles everywhere in Asia, touching rural and urban surroundings. The third is we find security transformations, so safety, conflicts, violence, and also the question of inclusion and exclusion has to be dealt with. Fourth, disease transformations. The triple burden of disease, globalization, drugs, all these situations are changing tremendously. And finally, the health sector transformations, bringing in the foreground the advantage of urban health, the question of how to deal with disparities, and touching the pluralism of urban societies. Having sketched that briefly, I would like to thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion directly with my colleagues or via email. Thank you very much.
Ms. Kabisch, you're still muted.
This was the presentation by Frauke Gras from the University in Cologne. And the background of this presentation is a new research approach very interdisciplinary and directed on huge challenges in Asia. And what she mentioned was, and what she underlined, that the health systems are much, much insufficient. And in particular in Asia, we can find many, many evidences about this. And to come to this, or to deal with this issue from a research perspective, it's absolutely clear that we need interdisciplinary research. So what Carsten already mentioned in his presentation, we have to, for example, we have to realize the spatial perspective, that people in-migrate, but also out-migrate, have to be expelled from cities. So these are quite new situations which influence the health situation, and in particular in such situation like Corona or other pandemic crisis. So and the idea is to get a funding by the DFG for a large research program in which a number of research projects can be included in the next year. And the beginning of this project proposal was an intensive exchange about the major points dealing with this issue. So, and we found out that of course, the health issue from the doctor for the medicine perspective is important, but we decided to tackle much more questions concerning societal challenges, like lifestyle, like family changes, etc., what Frauke mentioned. So this is a quite new perspective. And yeah, we hope that we will be successful with our application. So are there any questions or remarks to this presentation by Frauke Kraas? Or Carsten, maybe you will add some points.
Well, I think you nicely sketched the framework. I think what is important is the essence of our application are actually the last 5 points that Frauke mentioned in her presentation, because these are really fields which we identified which are under-researched. And interestingly, the health, especially urban health issues in Asia, are very under-researched. There's a lot of stereotypes which are still applied, where people think about infectious diseases, which are still prevalent. But we see a disease transformation taking place, a health transformation, with, for example, non-communicable disease being on the rise. And I think the changing urban context will bring other health transformations. And we think it's now really timely to look at this and to investigate this. And of course, setting here the context with the urban and rural, when we talk about urban health in these cities, you cannot really separate it from the rural health, because those spaces are through multiple migration networks really intensively connected. So are there any questions which
Lucas,
maybe
are there
Sigrun
any
or I?
questions in the MEA feed?
Right now, there are no questions or remarks concerning the presentation.
In that sense, I would like to add one point. Of course, nowadays we are dealing with our own problems from the scientific perspective in our cities, in the rural hinterland, in Germany. But we should not forget that in other countries worldwide, the epidemic is also present, and in some places much stronger and with much more threats than in Germany. So that's why We stress that it is necessary for us as scientists also to widen the perspective, the spatial perspective, not only speaking and thinking about our German or local problems, but also looking for upscaling and looking for solutions which can be used also in other parts of the world, and also vice versa, maybe what can we learn from problem solution in other parts of the world. Okay, any questions in the mayor? No? Yeah, stop. Stefan?
Questions right now.
So I can read it out. Sorry, Lucas, for disturbance. The question just popped up right in that moment. Karim Hussein is asking, this is a strange issue, he's saying, related to food and farming in the context of COVID-19 have been highlighted by the major international organizations, rural development, rural urban linkages, food and agriculture in the FAO. This is more a comment on that point, I think. So we have about half an hour left in our session. So maybe we move to the next speaker then.
Yeah, now we can continue. On the list was originally Isabel Lopa Ramos from Portugal. Unfortunately, she cannot connect with us. That's why we invite Frederick Rudolph to give his presentation now. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Sigrun. Thank you so much. I share my screen. Hope everybody can see my slides. So my pitch is about how successful urban environmental protection helps with coping with the pandemic. So more related to the first question of this session. And the idea I have here with my pitch is presenting some ideas from a recent research project that we here at the Wuppertal Institute conducted, commissioned by the German Federal Environment Agency. It was about searching good practice of urban environmental protection. So we started this 3 years ago already. It's now almost finalized. So good practice of urban environmental protection in 6 countries. You can see these countries on the world map here on my slide, and 6 cases, so 6 cities out of those, each one in one of those 6 countries. And we searched for good practice in different fields of activity. So you can see those, so urban environmental protection can mean many different things. You see in the red block different fields of activity, all of which the cities are working on. We have been analyzing, and then we searched for factors of success. So good practice obviously is successful. We only search for successful urban environmental protection, and we focused on the one hand on multi-level governance. So the question is to what extent national policy levels can help their cities with urban environmental protection approaches, whatever this may be, policies, measures, or any other activity. And then we also had a look in each of those cases to the local efforts, so the really like the special cases, the unique approaches of those cities. And to provide you with some examples what this actually means. Here, one example of air pollution in Cape Town. So random example, if you like, random field of activity. Interesting here is now the factors of success, and air pollution reduction in Cape Town starts with the national ambient air quality standards. So from the national policy level, which I would say quite similar with the recommendations of the World Health Organization. And then Cape Town implements those standards in air quality management plans and bylaws. which regulate emissions of atmospheric pollutants and put in place a licensing and penalty system. So here they really demand every installation to have a plan how to cut emissions, air quality, the local pollutants. And then the second factor of success with respect to this case is measurement stations. So obviously, if you want to see whether you are successful, if you want to shape your policies and measures, you need monitoring. So they installed a lot of measurement stations all over the city. Third factor of success in Cape Town, and in this example, was establishment of an air quality management unit, which is a team that controls and enforces this licensing system and also the penalty system, and which is also somehow a team where citizens can feedback and report about their air quality in their neighborhood. So kind of a public participation institution. And then what also helped was cross-sectoral strategies to increase renewable energies, reduce motorized transport. So cross-sectoral strategies as a main mean to also reduce air pollution. Second example, just to provide you with some insights what we have been working on. And it's another city, it's now Beijing, and it's another field of activity. It's now water management in Beijing. And again, here some factors of success. So Beijing was successful with water management because they implemented both command and control instruments and market-based instruments. So the command and control side is that they implemented. It was originally implemented by the national side, what they call the most stringent water resource management targets issued by the central government in 2012, and which really set limits to water resource exploitation, water use, and water quality. And those binding targets are really included as criteria in the CADA evaluation system of the local officers. So if the targets are not met, then that affects badly the career of those officers. So very, let's say, top-down and strict measures, but successful. But then they also had a progressive water resource fee system. So the more water you consume, the even more money you have to pay. And money also helped, which is the last factor of success. So money helps because they did a lot of investments into wastewater treatment facilities. Last example, just to provide a little overview, what we did. So climate change mitigation in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. So again, a different field of activity. And you may know that Brazil has been a role model in successful climate change mitigation since the 1990s. So they hosted the World Summit, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, and then they really followed up with a lot of plans and strategies on the national level, boiled down into different sectors with targets, and also accompanied with a lot of fundings to the cities to meet those targets. And they also build a lot of capacity among the administration, so the administration really knows what to do, why policies can be successful, how they can be ambitious, how you can also convince politicians that something has to be implemented, how you can convince the civil society. So a lot of capacity has been built on all policy levels to mitigate climate change. And Belo has done this as well, so it is in line with the national policy. It's also very active in international city networks. And what's interesting here in this example, they stick with these policies, with these ambitious policies, even as the Bolsonaro regime now has taken over, and they have cut the budget for climate change mitigation and done other counterproductive things. And even now, as they have in Belo Horizonte, another populistic mayor who took over, they stick with these policies because they are so long-term, have been so long-term implemented, and the staff of the local administration really knows what to do. And one example is that they really work on ambitious mobility policies, fostering multimodal approaches. Okay, so what has this to do with the pandemic? And what I do here now, and this is my last slide, and it's kind of a think piece, if you like. I connect in the left column on the left-hand side, I connect those factors of successful urban environmental protection, those that we analyzed in this study. I connect this with the resilience of the cities amid the pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis. And I distinguish between organizational and physical resilience, if you like. So those factors of success, they change. In order to be successful, the local administration needs to change certain things. And these things, they have to change. I call it organizational resilience. They are also helpful with fighting and mitigating this crisis and this external shock. And there were also some, let's say, physical outcomes of those approaches to protect the urban environment. This is on the right-hand side. So monitoring is a very important success factor. And all those data-driven approaches, it has already been mentioned by Stefan and others, they help with monitoring how, the policies, the environmental protection policies develop. But amidst the pandemic, they also help with mitigating this external shock, so digital services of the public sector, delivery services. And it also has a physical component as cities, and this was mentioned already as well a little bit. They have to reorganize their mobility. And as you can use apps and data-driven approaches the public transport uses, they can switch to, for example, bike sharing, car sharing, at least more easily. Trained staff capacity is also very important. Obviously, if they, I try to, 90 minutes left. I try to be faster. It's again, it's my last slide. Sorry, I see it's only 90 minutes left. So trained staff is important to protect the urban environment, and trained staff also has the ability to work in new ways with new partners and new regulations, and makes the city more resilient. Public participation is quite similar. So interactive platforms are very important to, as a feedback mechanism in those approaches, and they are also important amid the pandemic. Tactical urbanism, this is something that I want to stress. It's quite important if you, as a city, implement whatever kind of policy measure to protect the environment. It's easy to have pilot, like something that can be done on a, let's say, smaller scale and only short term, and you see if this works or not works, and then if it works, you extend it long term. And this is something that we can see as the crisis goes on with the pop-up bike lanes. Cross-sectoral plans. I mentioned this as success factor, and it's obviously a very big success factor if you have also being resilient against COVID-19, if you have urban green space. And urban green space is part of every cross-sectoral plan. So safe recreation in that case. Efficient usage of national funding. So if any city knows how to use funding from the national side efficiently, then it can also fast help the local economy. Same applies to coordination of policy levels. So if this is very important, so as different institutions know what they have to do and what they can do and their responsibilities, then they can also effectively implement resilience measures to fight the outcomes of the pandemic. So that's my think piece, if you like, and it needs some evidence. If this is also really true, if those cities that apply those approaches to protect the urban environment are also really more resilient. And thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to discuss it a little bit more.
Thank you very much. You have been a little bit time-consuming.
How long did I speak?
But nevertheless, we should use the chance for discussing pressing questions. And Carsten had a question to you. And I will read the question from the chat. How fundamental will the changes be the COVID-19 crisis causes? Will we see incremental change or fundamental change? If the latter is the case, do cities have enough resources to reinvent themselves? So this is a quite huge question, and it is appropriate to the final discussion. No? But maybe, Frederick, you have a short first answer.
The short answer is I don't know yet. I don't know at all. I would say this is up. This is we can't do any prediction to that.
Yeah, the question is what Carsten mentioned. Yeah, is there a window of opportunity that we can pursue very great transformations nowadays? And what is appropriate, what supports these, but where are also the limitations? And this is again that what Mariana mentioned. But also this can we discuss further in the final discussion. And now I invite Annika to her presentation. Yeah, please, the floor is yours, Annika.
Hello, everyone. I will also share my slides with you. Yes. So I'm also working at the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research here in Leipzig in the Department for Urban and Environmental Sociology. And I would like to share some reflections with you on the experiences and that we had in our research on sustainable and resilient cities here. Especially my input comes from the exchange with my colleagues within the integrated project Urban Transformations. But I will have to say it has a certain personal bias and a certain social science bias because I am a social scientist, social geographer. So a very brief, let's say a very brief flight through the last month and what we experienced. We realized, like very quickly, we realized that the COVID-19 crisis has a very certain urban character. Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary, General Secretary, he said that urban areas are the ground zero of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have already heard about interrelations with urban environmental justice issues and certain hazards. We also have to acknowledge that there's a lot of gender aspects in this crisis. Majority of health workers are women. Women are more in charge with care work now. We have a higher risk of job loss and income loss for women. There are certain statistics showing this. We have a new visibility of multiple disadvantages related to health, housing, and the socioeconomic situation. And with all this comes also a different chances for people to prevent themselves from the risk related to different jobs. We have also seen quite an impressive, let's say, discourse, but of course also direct actions under the term of solidarity, support networks coming up. We have seen a quite impressive movements that some urban areas quite quickly changed things that have not been imaginable short time before like this. But we also realized that this might be only smaller, that we might face even future challenges in the future. So I would like to conclude also with quoting some of my colleagues that we need to understand COVID-19 pandemic as closely intertwined with other crises, climate, economic crisis. So it is a profoundly urban social crisis and a justice challenge. It shows the old inequalities and creates new disadvantages and vulnerabilities, and it's a transdisciplinary societal challenge that requires coordinated systemic thinking and actions in the context of a certain uncertainty. So I want to give you some examples from our research here at the URF2020. Exactly these uncertainties is something that trickled down to our daily research activities. We had to shift, we are constantly shifting between this certain idea of post-corona cities, of exchange and post-corona visions, but at the same time, we are trying to research currently cities under corona. So we have a longitudinal study here. Ms. Kabisch is in charge of this since many years. So we have data which is derived since 1976 and some panel studies. So how does this now go into how does this affect such studies? We have participatory and transdisciplinary projects which are and empirical work that is really based on direct contacts, on direct interactions and activities in the neighborhoods, in the city itself. So we have to cancel, we have to adapt, and we have to rethink a lot of our work. But also on a more general perspective, I would say we have to deepen our transformative literacy, as Uwe Schneiderwind mentioned it. So the ability to read and utilize information about societal transformation processes and to get also involved in these processes. This also means we have to engage in transdisciplinary production. Of course, we are already doing it, but I think we have to do it even more under these certain circumstances. We have to include what I just mentioned, these very different vulnerabilities and injustices. We have to include these intersectional perspectives and these drivers of injustice in urban sustainability much more in our research. And we also have to apply an understanding. I think this was also mentioned during the day, the paradoxes and the conflicts that might arise with resilience. So if we talk about greening in urban areas and higher sustainability and resilience, we also have to talk about, for example, green gentrification. And I also want to invite you, you were not able to join us here in the city of Leipzig, but I would like to invite you to have a little impression on what is happening in this city right now and how this is maybe creating a very complex urban scenario if we talk about sustainability issues and crisis governance. We have an intensified and multiplied use of urban green structure. So we have more activities, we have a run on the allotment gardens, but this might also cause challenges for biodiversity in these parks if they are used much, much more. We have now urban environmental issues, justice issues adopted in the master plan green by the municipality, but we still have to see what concrete policy change this also has to bring with it. We have a lot of civic engagement, bottom-up activities for people demanding for more urban spaces, green spaces. We have ideas from other European cities being brought to Leipzig, especially now under Corona times. There were certain activities and engagements that arise now. We have Leipzig is the city in Germany which has the most community-supported agriculture projects. And even if this is still a niche phenomenon in food provision, in regional food provision, this is these are very interesting examples of alternative food economies. And we also had in Leipzig a very, very impressive broad picture of local support networks during the crisis. So we have certain aspects which, let's say, can create a very, very positive, a very interesting picture if we think of sustainability. But those of you who followed the media in Germany, they might also have realized, or maybe it even is international media. We have a very severe mobilizations of right-wing populism, of former neo-Nazis, of people who are very open for conspiracy theories. And I mentioned this especially because there's a very close connection to the denial of climate change and to the pro-coal movement, pro-car movements, etc. So this is a puzzle piece of impressions and thoughts, but I think it is extremely important to realize this embedding of when we talk about sustainability into these discourses in society, which might not always be the same. So if we talk about resilience, people have very different understandings. And also for the common good, it can be very different things if I think of the Leipzig Charter that was mentioned today. Sorry, I really had to run now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Annika. It was very nice. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the final conclusions, and I would like to draw your attention to our initial two questions. The first was, what did we learn by this corona situation, this crisis? And the second is, can in particular our urban-rural partnerships, this specific perspective, foster solutions? And I think we have heard a number of good arguments which can answer these questions, and also arguments which popped up in a number of presentations. So I would like to give you the floor to summarize some points. Maybe everybody of you have 2 sentences to give a kind of a preliminary answer. Maybe Carsten, you will start.
Yes. Well, I would actually say that we learned that although we all, or those who have been looking at this, knew that the pandemic would come, we are actually not well prepared, and that we really have to rethink how we can organize cities better so that they can deal better with these black swan events. And the second point I think is very important. I think we have to reorganize rural-urban partnerships. I'm also talking here as a researcher who is working in the Global South, because at the moment it's very uneven. And I think we really have to think more integrative and how we can actually give better living opportunities for those people who live translocally, and that's very essential for these rural-urban partnerships.
Thank you. Mariana, would you give us your voice? No? No? Annika? Yeah, she refers to her presentation, and yeah, she gives us a lot of food for thought. And Stefan?
Sorry, the challenge of sharing the screen and finding the button to unmute. Big challenges we are talking about. Thoughts when listening to us and talking about the resiliency was, I am convinced that urban-rural partnerships actually can help us to increase the resiliency of the regional systems. If we establish new partnerships, if we increase the links in the system we have, then I'm convinced that the system as such will be able to better keep functioning the individual elements that would have failed otherwise in the pandemic. The idea is that think about the hospitals, think about the energy provision, the schooling. If there is an impact on 1 or 2 pieces of it, they are most likely caused to fail, and there is no substitution. However, if we have good links and if we have institutions and instruments to actually stand in case of such an accident in a urban-rural partnership in particular, then this shockwave can be taken by the entire system and it will be less severe. That would be my conclusion here.
Thank you. And Frederick, you will have the last minute.
I always want to have the last word. Thank you so much, Sigrun. I think it's all about...
Frederick is no more.
I should be heard now? No? Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Working, yeah.
I try to speak only now. So very brief, I think it's all about learning. I think there's a lot of cities that are really ambitious and also a lot of cities that have a lot of pressure and cities that have a lot of good solutions because they have specialized knowledge, they have money, they can do more than the rural hinterland. And I think it's about learning. So if rural hinterland realizes there's a lot, there was something happening which is successful, then they will maybe try to do something similar. And I think so. It's about networking and learning. Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much, all of you, all the participants for discussing and listening. And I hope you will enjoy the conference. Now we have a break and then we have the final sessions for this day, for today. And don't miss the interesting Leipzig film this evening. We see us tomorrow. So all the best for you. Bye-bye. Thank you for all these interesting discussions. Bye-bye.